All right. Well, my name is Tony Berard, and I'm here to talk about the block transition tournament. This will be part 3. I'm at 20 units of power, so we'll see if I make it. All right. The first video in this series, we talked about just the plain vanilla block transition tournament. And then I showed there was 2 distribution methods, the even distribution method and the power concentration method. I talked about the path of least resistance for the primary player. And we went through the even distribution seeding, and the last phase of a tournament will be the power concentration phase, where all the top players are in the top block. In the next video, we talked about the migrating block. That's a 2 block. And so this is round 1, round 2, round 3, where this player will play the same player 3 times in a row. We only have the player swap rule in the power concentration phase. I might have made a mistake talking about that you could switch in the even distribution phase. That's not true. The player swap rule is only in effect in the power concentration phase. I talked about the fair coin that determines color assignment. And then I showed the block moving up, then the block moving up, then the block moving up, but 1 does not play 2 yet. In the final phase, 1 plays 2. If you want a little bit shorter tournament, you can start the block off not here, but here. It's at one of the lowest levels anyway, so it gets interesting near the end, so you wouldn't lose the interesting stuff. So you could knock off 3 rounds by starting the block here. All right, there's a lot of plasticity to this. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next topic in the block transition tournament. And that's going to be with attrition. So the block transition tournament with attrition. Attrition is loss. They'll talk about the attrition rate in college. You know, how many students they lose. Well, we can have attrition in the block transition tournament also. So instead of running a Swiss, let's say we have 200 players. The Chess World Cup is 128 players, so it's kind of similar. All right, so we can use 4 blocks, and I'll just designate the first 2, and then ... and then the last 2. But you would have all these blocks in the middle. So if you have 200 players, it's 50 times 4. So you'd have 50 blocks of 4. And you seed them with the even distribution method. 1, 2, blah, 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 down to 49 and 50. And then 51, 52, on down to 99 and 100. Then 101, 102, and so on until you get to 149, and then 150. Then 151, 152, and so on till you get to 199 and 200. So this is 50, 100, 150, 200. These are the 9s, 2s, 1s. Kind of see the pattern. All right. And so you would still do, you know, 1 would play 101. And what is this? That's not 101. Can't even read my own writing. Oh, that's 151. So 1 would not play 101. 1 would play 151. 2 would play 152, and so on. 51 would play 101, and 52 would play 102. These two guys would play, and these two guys would play, or gals, as the case may be. And so we have this first round. And then we'd have the second round where one would play 101, and the third round would be one would play 51. And then we re-rank and reseed. And in the second block would be like the first block. So I'll just put ... After that, then we do attrition. You can knock off, let's say the bottom half of the blocks. And so then you'd have 100 players left. And so all players will get to play 6 games. After that, 100 players would remain, and they would continue playing. And you could do one block, and then knock off the bottom half. So then you'd have 50 players left. So 1, 2, 3 phases would be 9 games, and 50 players left would be 12 games. And you could stop there, I suppose, and rank the remaining 50 players and decide a winner. Or you could keep going for 1 or 2 more phases. And that's how attrition can work. The World Cup is a knockout tournament, and I've talked about the knockout tournament not being a good way to run a tournament. It's just not. And so, ideally, let me say this. Magnus Carlsen wanted to have a knockout-style tournament to determine the world champion. And he wanted to be in it too. That the winner of the knockout tournament would be the world champion. But he caught a lot of backlash for it. And obviously he's held 2 title defenses since he said that. And neither one of them was in the knockout style. The block transition tournament would be a better way to do that. The World Cup could be run as a block transition tournament. Just like this. You could put 200 players in there, 2 phases to give 6 games. Then you'd have 100 players with 3 games. Then you'd have 50 players at 3 games. And sometimes these players will play a lot more. So you could go down to 25 players. Well, no, you couldn't go down to 25. You'd have to go down to 24. And then maybe down to 12. Why can't you go down to 25? Because there's 4 players in a block. So there'd be an odd man out. So you could go down to 24 and then down to 12, and then determine a winner with the best score. Something like that. That could be a great way to do it. But knockout, no. Knockouts are bad because players do not get to play at their ratings. And we've seen on the women's side all the time, lower rated players can make it through, and become the world champion, even though they're not the strongest player. And they know they're not the strongest player. But I don't know. Sometimes the strongest player does win. Like when Paul Morphy played in the first Continental Chess Congress. He won that very handily. I think he lost 1 game to Louis Paulson. But other than that, he clobbered everybody. I did that tournament with my rating system, and Paul Morphy scored over a 300 for the G-score. So it's one of the elite performances of all time. So, yeah, he was the man. He was the man. All right. Next thing I'm going to talk about is how we can run a candidates tournament. You can have maybe 20 players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can have a candidates tournament with 20 players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you only use the even distribution method. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And you might run this 5 times. After each time, 1 would play 16, 6 would play 11, 2 would play 17, and so on. That would be round 1. Round 2, 1 would play 11. Round 3, 1 would play 6. And then you would reseed and do it again. And you could do 5 phases. So that would be 15 games. A current double round robin with 7 players, 8 players, is 14 games, because one player will play 7 other players, 2 times each. 2 times 7 is 14. So you could have 20 players, and you could do 5 phases to get 15 games. One more game, and the idea is, can number 1 hold his spot through the 5 phases? Can number 2 hold his spot or her spot throughout the 5 phases? And so on. 3, 4, 5. These would be the primary players. And you don't do a power concentration phase. So 1 will never play 2 in this format. That's going to be saved for the World Championship. 3 would get an honorable mention, and in the event if number 1 or number 2 couldn't play, then number 3 would get invited to become the world champion. And you could have a match between the top 2 finishers. So that's my idea on how you can run a candidates tournament. You could get more players in, and you would play 15 games. So that's the block transition tournament thus far. I'll do another video, at least one more video, where I'll talk about the cross blocks, the cross block games. And yeah, this is, I mean, it's taking a lot of videos to make it through all the different things, because this is an incredibly powerful tournament design. And it can take the place of all modern forms of tournaments. That's pretty cool. All right, this is Tony Berard signing off.